Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm so glad that you've joined us this morning. Needless to say, and I think this will be a common theme, we have a lot to talk about. And they tie in perfectly with comments from viewers after yesterday's program. One viewer, writing just a little after the program aired, saying, "Hello, Frank." Well, hello. "It just occurred to me that for some time now, I've heard little to no attention of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like her or not, she seemed to be a cheerleader for Trump. Any idea or views what her status is?" Well, you may have got the next best thing, folks. What are your thoughts? I forgot my waves this morning. What are your thoughts about the pick of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General? Is there a chance that he actually gets in? I mean, does he get voted in, or is it one of the recess appointments? I'm not sure, if I'm being honest with you this morning. I'm not sure what to think. That's why I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts about Matt Gaetz. But as to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I have not heard really hide nor hair about her lately, so I'm not sure the reasoning behind that. But yes, Matt Gaetz, nominee for Attorney General. We are going to take a deep dive into that. We could probably spend the whole show on that. But we do have other announcements that will be, not announcements, but conversation we'll be having about other picks that Trump made yesterday. Some exciting ones. I would say Matt Gaetz, Pete Hegseth was probably, before Matt Gaetz, the most, I don't like the word shocking, but one that not expected, unexpected pick. That's not a negative for Pete Hegseth at all. It was just, wow, did not see that coming. As a matter of fact, the more we learn and the more people that are coming out talking about him, the more I'm excited about that pick. As to Matt Gaetz, we're learning a lot. I've got probably 5 or 6 opinion pieces from both sides that we'll be taking a look at. I know that he abruptly resigned as congressman on, yesterday. So that there's some things there that we'll dissect. Another comment from a different viewer. "Well, the Senate showed its true colors. Even with the win, we don't get the prize." I understand the frustration with John Thune being picked as majority leader. Very many people believe in line with Mitch McConnell in that sense, where there was Rick Scott that many more conservatives were leaning towards. Now, I don't know if I want to say defense, but John Thune did say yesterday that Senate Republicans are excited to put Trump's agenda into action. He said, "Just got off the phone with Donald Trump. Senate Republicans are excited and ready to get to work implementing President Trump's agenda on behalf of the American people." He said, "We have a mandate from the American people, a mandate not only to clean up the mess left by the Biden-Harris-Schumer agenda, but also to deliver on President Trump's priorities." Thune pointed to enforcing border security laws, streamlining the bureaucratic machine. I don't know if I like the wording of that. And unleashing American energy dominance as several critical areas of focus. Also, the big news yesterday, it has been called that Republicans did take the House. So we have, the Republicans have a trifecta, if you will, the House, the White House, the Senate. Now, as of this morning, President-elect Donald Trump's picks for his new administration. Of course, we have Susie Wiles. We know that as White House Chief of Staff. Marco Rubio was officially announced yesterday, though we had mentioned on the show that rumors were swirling that he would be picked, Marco Rubio, as Secretary of State. I would love to hear your thought on that. Pete Hegseth, as we mentioned, Secretary of Defense. Matt Gaetz, the most surprising and shocking pick, is interesting. Scott Jennings from CNN said, "Are you not entertained?" Well, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of conversation, and it's a prime example, and you may recall it during Trump's initial term, where it's decisions like this that are not necessarily bad decisions outright. I'm not sure, but this gives the media something to focus on to not only attack Matt Gaetz, but attack Republicans and attack Donald Trump. And it is, and MAGA specifically. it's something we'll be getting used to because we've been used to it for a long, long time. So we'll show you some of those articles here in just a little bit. Kristi Noem, yesterday, we announced Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Tulsi Gabbard was picked for Director of National Intelligence. That we'll discuss further. And then, of course, we have Elise Stefanik, Ambassador of the United Nations, Mike Huckabee, Ambassador to Israel, Steve Witkoff, Special Envoy to the Middle East, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, John Ratcliffe, CIA Director, Lee Zeldin, Environmental Protection Agency Administrator, Bill McGinley, White House Counsel, Elon Musk, the Department of Government Efficiency, along with, of course, Vivek Ramaswamy. And then someone who's becoming a fan favorite, it looks like, Tom Homan, the border czar. Hearing a lot about him. We're going to be talking about many of those picks. Some of the ones that were previously announced we'll probably stay away from. A little bit about Pete Hegseth, though. So some interesting picks. Loyalists. Again, we're not going to have that conversation. But loyalists, as if a president doesn't pick people that would be loyal to him to be in his cabinet. Also announced yesterday, Special Counsel Jack Smith asked a federal appellate court on Wednesday to halt his appeal in President-elect Donald Trump's classified documents case, citing the results of the 2024 election. Quote, as a result of the election held on November 5th, 2024, one of the defendants in this case, Donald J. Trump, is expected to be certified as president-elect on January 6th, 2025, and inaugurated on January 20th, 2025. The government respectfully requests the court hold this appeal in abeyance and stay the deadline for the government's reply brief, which is currently due on November 15th, 2024. Until December 2nd, 2024, to afford the government time to assess this unprecedented circumstance and determine the appropriate course going forward consistent with the Department of Justice policy. Now, many are speculating that Jack Smith will retire or step down from his position before Donald Trump can fire him. Because if you recall, Donald Trump said he would fire Jack Smith within 2 seconds of becoming president. I could actually see it happening during his inaugural address, if I'm being honest. But yes, Jack Smith stands down in the classified documents case, and also being speculated that he will retire before Donald Trump gets to fire him. You know, I resign before, or I quit before you'll fire me idea. A couple of other quick updates. I have so much to get to, and some of these will bear with me because we are going to talk in depth about the people that Trump is nominating for his administration. Trust me, we're going to be talking a lot about Matt Gaetz. We're going to talk a lot about Pete Hegseth. Also, Tulsi Gabbard. What do you think about that? I know we've had a lot of Tulsi Gabbard fans. I've talked to people anecdotally that were really impressed with Donald Trump's campaign able to get Tulsi Gabbard to support him, and also Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Maybe people that weren't necessarily Trump fans, but were also struggling financially, struggling with the way the country is today, saying, well, that's actually essentially a bipartisan administration where all you had from Harris were the Cheneys, which, not all, but those were the main ones they focused on, which are not really fan favorites of the Democrats. So we're not going to relitigate that, but worth mentioning that support for Tulsi Gabbard. By the way, California, we mentioned this the other day, the school district where the teacher went on that rant, the world history teacher went on that rant on Trump, comparing him to Hitler, saying vile things in front of the classroom the day after the election. Furious parents in that school district are now calling for him to be fired because as of now he's just on leave. They're asking the school district, why have they not fired the problematic teacher? The teacher's last name, Perez. I don't want to say all the names that he called Trump. But it's time that the school district stops tolerating hate speech in class. There should be a zero tolerance for hate speech, one mother argued, according to video shared online by the education department there. To say that I'm not going to try to quote all these, but to say that a Hispanic man wants to, well, I don't want to go into what each individual parent had to say. One father called out the students who gave their support for Perez after the teacher aimed his comments towards the Hispanic population. And that was one of the other things, much like Joe Scarborough, really going down a path that was very, well, we'll use their term, problematic, racially problematic. What Mr. Perez just did is make the most racist comment to tell them that their fathers, that if they voted for Trump, that they only did it because they wish they were white. That is the worst of it all. Shame on him, said one father. He said things that should not have been said. He used profane language. He has a right to say those things, but not at our schools. That was just crossing the line. There needs to be some major consequences. Well, I think so many teachers feel untouchable. It goes to the college level, too, where we've seen so many of these protests where, you're surrounded by yes people. Those people are looking to get good grades. They're not going to fight back on their teacher in most instances. So they're surrounded by yes men, and in their bubble, with, at least if you look at the teachers unions, in their bubble, Democrats. So, it's just one big echo chamber. So thought that they were this Maximiliano Perez, the teacher that said these horrific things, felt that he was untouchable. So now teachers are demanding that he be fired. Just wanted to give you that update because I brought that story to you the other day. We also have a couple media updates before we take that dive into the nominating process. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. As I said, the Republicans have the trifecta, the White House, the Senate, and the House. It has now been called, at least, so as official as it can become until swearing-in day. What is your thoughts on John Thune being picked as majority leader in the Senate? Mike Johnson receiving unanimous vote to return as speaker, and which I'm very glad with. I thought he's been doing a very good job, an effective job. It was such going back to that one viewer's comments talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we talked about Matt Gaetz. That was quite a contentious time in the House when Kevin McCarthy was voted out, and you had the back and forth. So to be Speaker, Mike Johnson, to get that unanimous support, I think is a move in the right direction. And as you saw, Mike Johnson was giving numerous rally speeches and attending numerous events with Trump during the campaign season. So I want your opinions on all the news of the day, and there's so much of it, so we better take our first break before we run too late. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning, that you just saw that beautiful view of. A couple comments from viewers. I found it disturbing when the press secretary answered the question about Trump being a threat to democracy. Basically, she stood her ground. Yes, the question was posed, does Joe Biden still believe that, and I'm paraphrasing, that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy? And Karine Jean-Pierre said, and I quote, what he said still stands, and it's not just him. Talk about a unifying message. And it sounds like they had a nice get-together, if you will, a nice meeting between President-elect Trump and President Joe Biden. Yeah, we may talk a little bit about it. There seems to be some other big news out there. Another comment in reference to Matt Gaetz. He walks a fine line in my mind. I understand that. But he will... Oh, we good? Had a little bit of pause there. He walks a fine line. This is in reference to Matt Gaetz, in my mind. But he will definitely raise the eyebrows of the deep state. Sounds like he's going to be Trump's guard dog. Interesting point. Absolutely. I thought there was and I'm going to get to it later on, but the New York Post, I thought, had a really good headline in their editorial this morning, and it was, Trump's transition is offering the dawn of a new reform era, plus Matt Gaetz. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but again, I want to hear from all sides on this, and your opinion on the pick for Matt Gaetz. By the way, just as a fun note, before we dive into the heavy stuff, the top brass at ABC are now scrambling to bring in pro-Trump voices to The View and other shows that they offer. They're in panic mode. They did not expect this, like back in 2016. And as you've seen frequently from The View, and we're going to get to something they had to say the other day, but clearly not a Trump-oriented show. I don't know. They will put probably one pro-Trump type person on The View, and all that does is have the rest of The View, and this goes with a lot of shows, screaming at that one pro-Trump person. But the Disney-owned network, which came under fire over how ABC News moderators grilled Donald Trump during the presidential debate, have been holding high-level meetings since last week's rout of the former president, by the former president, excuse me. ABC News Group President Deborah O'Connell and a recently elevated boss of ABC News, Alman, I'm going to try here, Karmahamodevic, held the intense sit-downs with executive producers of the network's various shows. Yeah, if you look at it, CNN laying off numerous people because their ratings plummeting, hundreds. We know the far-left Axios was laying off people. I think some outlets, and whether or not it comes true or comes to fruition, ABC News may be reading the writing on the wall saying we need to adapt if we're going to survive. But first on the agenda, according to one insider, is finding a pro-Trump panelist for its top-ranked daytime talk show. So far, it's pretty much ultra-liberals, but then there's a kind of the Republicans that, well, you could be the judge of whether or not they're Republicans. The View is facing pressure from higher-ups. Viewers can expect some major changes, including bringing in new panelists that can bring in a pro-Trump perspective. Keep in mind, everyone on The View endorsed Kamala Harris. They lost. They're out of touch with America, one source said. For a show about different perspectives, The View doesn't seem to have any when it comes to Trump. ABC bosses don't want to alienate the pro-Trump demographic. Yes, which is now over half of the country. So they're realizing, whoa, wait a minute. And this is very reminiscent of 2016 when everyone just assumed that Hillary Clinton was going to win. That's one reason why I think they didn't fight as hard for Merrick Garland to be in the Supreme Court, because they thought, well, we'll wait a little bit. Because Republicans are already showing signs of caving. They said, no, we'll wait. Obviously, Hillary's going to get it, and then we'll get to pick. That's how confident they were. Same with the shows like this. They were that confident because they believe they're speaking. It's just like I talked about yesterday and the day before. When you watch election night coverage, they are speaking to you as if obviously you voted for Kamala Harris, and they need to tell you how your vote is going to matter and get her across the finish line. It was really fascinating to watch, realizing that I felt like I was being talked to as if I had went into the booth, guaranteed, and voted for Kamala Harris. That's very much what The View is. It is an echo chamber. I guess that's the word of the day. It is an audience, at least in their mind, that wants to have their worldview confirmed, but now they realize that worldview. Over 50% of the American people don't agree with that worldview. And if you recall, Whoopi Goldberg, before we run, had mentioned, maybe you don't have dinner on Thanksgiving with your Trump-loving family members. Kristen Flemings has a very good point on this. She said, in 2024, curating your world to exclude those who voted for the 45th and now 47th president, that's apparently the right thing to do, especially if those voters are close family or friends. Slap the ban on them. Just say no to sharing a plate of Thanksgiving yams with your Trump-supporting aunt, even if she voted for Obama twice and Hillary in 2016. It's the doctor's orders. MSNBC's resident Chicken Little, Joy Reid, welcomed to her show Yale psychiatrist Dr. Amanda Calhoun, who dished a prescription for festering bitterness and loneliness. And remember, I mentioned this to you yesterday. It is, you don't need to talk to somebody that has that worldview, that has that belief in Trump. So what they're asking you to do is shut out half of the American population because, to use Joe Biden's term, they're garbage. So why would you need to talk to them? And it will create feelings of bitterness and loneliness, as Kristen Fleming said, but that doesn't seem to be a problem for Ms. Calhoun. And the same goes for Sonny Hoiston and others that we talked about on The View, saying it's a moral issue. Baked into this argument is an inherent selfishness, says Kristen Fleming. Why didn't you think about me and my delusions of oppression when you voted, not your own interests? So never mind that you can't afford groceries. Never mind any of that. You can't put food on the table. Why didn't you think about me and my delusions that it's the end of democracy, my delusions that it's a threat to society as we know it, to our lives as we know it? It's a sentiment that is very selfish. She's right. It's a sentiment that has been crop dusted all over social media with TikTok videos and tweets accompanied by performative acts of resistance. The excommunication movement has mostly sprung from the types who definitely have yard signs noting their tolerance. Yes, the ones that claim the most tolerant are the most intolerant, as we've seen time and time again. People like Star Trek actor George Takei, who is so out of touch he wants struggling Americans in the Rust Belt to think first of another country. Quote, another reason to turn away from those who voted for Trump is because of the people of Ukraine. Trump voters sentenced so many of them to be ground beneath Putin's boot, it's unforgivable. And a Democrat named Rick Taylor, who ran a long shot bid for the Ohio Senate seat, won by J.D. Vance in 2020, called his aunt a traitor for supporting the bad orange man. And he will not be spending Turkey Day with her. Thank you very much. Ironically, his bio says, still fighting to rebuild a coalition of the working class coalition. One very viral tweet from a man with the handle, well, I better not. But instead of doing an autopsy on the Kamala Harris campaign to understand the loss, these Democrats want to stick their fingers in their ears, close their eyes, and scream, drown out any realities that they don't like, that there is not confirming their worldview. That's why, they only tune in to The View and Stephen Colbert. That's why MSNBC saw such good ratings on election night. They just wanted their worldview confirmed, and the continued attacks on Donald Trump. Gone are the days, Kristen Fleming writes, of putting on your big girl and big boy pants and learning to get along. That was once a wonderful feature of our society, and yes, even our government, as politicians duked it out all day and convened for drinks at night. Trashing family and friends over a politician who doesn't even know your name is a grave mistake and a testament to one's fragility. And if you're participating in such partisan culling, here's one hard truth. Your late grandmother is very disappointed in you for acting like a jerk. I thought that was an interesting take from Kristen Fleming. All right. We are going to be talking about Matt Gaetz. I want to hear your opinion. What are your thoughts about Matt Gaetz' selection, nomination for Attorney General? Also, your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard. I know many people we heard from were excited, obviously, about the Doge group, which is Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. Many people were brought on board to the Trump coalition, the MAGA movement, I should say, by people like Tulsi Gabbard and people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So your thoughts on that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you again to Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. They're bringing us that beautiful view of Market Street as we broadcast from the Hesselson's studio. Question from a viewer: is Kennedy still going to be the head of health? There is some back and forth conversations on that, the way I understand it. And of course, it's all coming from anonymous sources. But they're wondering if he would be, because of his past, not statements, but past beliefs on vaccines and some other issues, they're not sure he could survive the nominating process and get the vote. So I don't know if they're going to try to come up with almost like they did with Homan, a border czar or like a health czar in this scenario. I have not heard specifically what the final outcome is on that, but that could change at any time. Okay, let's get into, I know, I keep saying one quick thing. I did want to mention this. Just, you may have heard this by now, and it's we're flipping over a little bit to New York State here. Did you see that Chris Cuomo admitted that he did not vote for Trump and that he did not vote for Harris, that he wrote in his brother's name, Andrew Cuomo? I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I can tell you who I voted for. He said during a podcast. This is Chris Cuomo, originally on CNN, now has his own show on another network, and I can't remember, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, I just don't remember which outlet it is. He said, I voted for my brother. I wrote him in. He didn't win, by the way. I don't know. Keeping Andrew Cuomo's name alive. So many people are. He had that op-ed the other day on why Democrats lost. And maybe if you look at the history of Andrew Cuomo and you look at the job that he did as governor, and now you look at the job that Governor Hochul is doing, it should come as no shock that according to Cornell University School of Public Policy's program on applied demographics, they did a study that shows that New York State's population could drop by some 2 million people by the year 2050. New York State's population could plummet by more than 2 million people by 2050, a drop of more than 13%. The population is projected to shrink markedly because of lower birth rates and aging and dying residents not being offset by new domestic or foreign arrivals. So they're trying to do it present it in a way that it's about open borders, essentially. But really, when it boils down to it, I think you push that aside. A lot of it is the mass exodus And who knows? It's a study predicting what's going to happen in 2050. These studies couldn't even predict what was going to happen on November 5th. But having said that, these policies that Hochul continues to push, and calling Republicans anti-American, anti-women, deciding the day after the election to attack Trump at a press conference with Letitia James, when, let's face it, New York could use some help from the federal government. Deciding it was all about Governor Hochul. It was all about getting the attention for her and being the first out of the gate, as New York tends to do with bad policies, bad decisions. This was about making herself the first out of the gate to attack Trump and tell him basically he's not welcome here in New York. That's why New York Democrats are fretting over the 2026 governor's race already. That's according to City and State New York. They're saying no one is safe. Newly reelected Representative Mike Lawler was already looking 2 years into the future, saying the only way we could change things for the better in our state is by changing governors. We must make that happen in 2026. Now, if you look at the inroads that Trump made with voters here in New York, no, he did not win New York. But if you look at the inroads he made, it was really groundbreaking, history-making. No, it's not like the landslide of Reagan-Mondale, where Reagan won New York, which is the last time that's happened. But it was huge numbers and really encouraging numbers. As someone who is always very pessimistic, as you heard on this program, very pessimistic about New York and their voting habits, we'll put it politely. Now, some, and you heard it on this program yesterday or the day before, some instantly nervous that Trump tapped Lee Zeldin to be in his administration, because many thought that Lee Zeldin, after doing so well the last time, may give it another shot because of the name recognition and the like. And he was traveling around the state, going to various Republican functions and like that. So there was, I think, solid speculation there. But Lee Zeldin was tapped to be Environmental Protection Agency Administrator in the Trump White House. But maybe this could signal that Representative Mike Lawler, is suggesting, or hinting towards, I should say, a run for governor. Now, he is pretty moderate. Now, conventional wisdom suggests that the party in power suffers during the midterms. Republicans will control all three branches of the federal government come January. New York Democrats have obviously denounced Donald Trump's victory, but historical evidence indicates his presidency should help them, making their 2026 candidates safer than under a Harris administration. But after a weak performance by Governor Kathy Hochul in 2022 and an overperformance by Trump across the state last week, some Democrats and their allies aren't too confident about conventional wisdom. Kevin Elkins, a political director of the New York City District Council of Carpenters, said no one is safe. He said that he sees a pathway for Republicans to unseat Hochul in 2026. A lot of that will have to do, of course, with name recognition, but New York at the forefront of attacking Trump, and now we see, people like Letitia James and Hochul and others, but just something to keep in mind, that no one is safe, and it'll take a somewhat well-known individual, whoever that may be. I'm not even going to speculate on that this early, but just tying those all in together since we were talking about New York quickly. I know we're jumping around talking about a lot of things. What are your thoughts about Matt Gaetz being selected? We're going to get into that next. Actually, I do have two just fun, quick stories that'll go very quickly, and then we're going to get into that. No, maybe not. Well, I'll figure it out after break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So GOP, that was a big win, controlling now having control of the House, giving the party all three branches under Trump. I mean, going back to the term that's being used widely, a landslide election for Trump. With Representative Juan Ciscomani's victory in Arizona's 6th congressional district, it'll give the GOP at least 218 House seats in the new Congress, with 9 races yet to be called. Republicans have flipped 6 seats in the lower chamber since Election Day, while Democrats have only picked up 1. The GOP's pickups include we don't have to go through all that, but House Republicans unanimously backed Mike Johnson. Your thoughts on that? I think Mike Johnson has been an effective and good Speaker of the House, but I'm not trying to bias you. So what are your thoughts about Speaker Mike Johnson? The 56th House Speaker was renominated in a voice vote without any objections during a closed-door session at the Hyatt Regency steps from the Capitol. Even far-right Representative, to that viewer's question, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who led an ill-fated effort to oust Johnson earlier this year, said his position was secure. So how things have changed. And that was a weird time in Washington, when aren't they? But when there was all that kind of inside fighting, it wasn't necessarily good for the party at the time. But it was, that kind of back and forth, and no, you did one thing I don't like, now you're out. And it was good to see, and I think this was necessary. It sent a good signal that he received unanimous support, that there wasn't any dissent. Most of the leadership positions are uncontested, Greene told reporters before the vote. Some hardline members had floated a challenge to Johnson's speakership Tuesday evening, but backed off at the last moment with no member willing to challenge the popular incumbent. It didn't hurt that Donald Trump had told lawmakers that he was with Mike Johnson, quote, all the way. That definitely helped. And I think especially as we get into a new administration, Trump's new administration, you're not going to want to see a Marjorie Taylor Greene or something like that go against, for lack of a better term, the wishes of Trump on this particular issue. And he is popular. Typically, speaker elections proceed along party lines, as you know. But Representative Anna Paulina Luna from Florida told reporters that Johnson's automatic re-election would depend on negotiations with some members. That could forecast a looming challenge from a member of the Conservative Freedom Caucus. Johnson needs 218 votes, a majority of the House's 435 seats, to keep the Speaker's gavel. House Republican Conference Chairwoman Elise Stefanik is one of the 3 GOP members in line to depart Congress in the executive branch, after Trump tapped her as his U.S. ambassador to the United Nations on Sunday. Mike Waltz was also selected to be the national security advisor. Trump had pledged not to nominate any more House Republicans for administrative posts hours before announcing far-right Representative Matt Gaetz as his attorney general. He kind of jokingly said, I'd appoint 15 of you, but I can't because then you'd be in the minority. Mark Molinaro, who is outgoing, though I think still challenging that. They actually said Mark Molinaro has not, and I don't necessarily like this, I like Mark Molinaro a lot, but not ruled out running in Stefanik's seat, so having to move. Interesting. Now, Steve Scalise and Tom Emmer are expected to remain in their roles in the new year. Scalise, of course, House Majority Leader, and Majority Whip Tom Emmer. So there you are. There's just some news updates. Your thoughts on Mike Johnson? Now, again, he was selected. There still is that vote. So, I mean, it's, again, a nominating process, just like the picks that Trump has been making. What are your thoughts on Mike Johnson? What are your thoughts on, in the Senate, John Thune? But before we walk away from the House for a moment, the blame game started to finally come to Hakeem Jeffries. Remember, Hakeem Jeffries was already getting the plaque set up for his office to be Speaker of the House. I mean, very confident. So all of a sudden people said, wait a minute. If everybody's getting all this blame for losing the House and losing the Senate and losing the White House, what about Hakeem Jeffries in this? This is one of his main jobs. Well, he, after some pushback, he did tell House Democrats he owns the election loss. He took responsibility for the outcome, Axios has reported. The Democrat leader's comments to a closed-door caucus meeting came after several House progressives told Axios that they would like him to answer for the election outcomes. Several also said they wanted Jeffries, who until Wednesday had maintained that Democrats still had a realistic shot at winning a majority, to acknowledge the party is on track to fall short of that goal. Speaking about the 2024 House election, Jeffries told House Democrats that, quote, the buck stops with me, according to 4 sources familiar with his remarks. One House Democrat in the room told Axios that Jeffries said there is a mathematical possibility we could take the minority, but not a probability. The lawmaker described the tone of the speech as responsible, but not apologetic, adding that everyone shouted no when he accepted total responsibility, but he was steadfast and classy. So a little blame finally going to Hakeem Jeffries, who was getting a lot of the credit for what was going to be the opposite, which is going to be a landslide. If you remember election coverage, it was, well, the House is going to go Democrat. Maybe the Senate goes Republican, but probably not with Trump at the top of the ticket. So if you were watching the news, the best case possibility for Republicans, if you were watching polls and various news outlets, was Kamala Harris and Tim Walz would be going to the White House. You would have the House taken over by Democrats, and you would have the Senate maybe narrowly won by Republicans. That was best case scenario. Now we wake up here on the 14th, just a little over a week after election, and it has been confirmed that it has been a trifecta win, where Donald Trump will be in the White House, of course, and you've got Republicans taking over the Senate and continuing to be the majority in the House. So Chuck Schumer, another win. Chuck Schumer is no longer majority leader, but as we heard from one viewer, not overly happy. John Thune has been selected leader, succeeding Mitch McConnell. John Thune of South Dakota will lead the conference for the next 2 years and succeed, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, the longest serving leader of either party in chamber history. Thune, who has served as the Republican whip since 2019, edged out John Cornyn of Texas, 29-24 on the ballot. Many people were calling for Rick Scott at one point, but he did end up defeating John Cornyn, 29-24. In a new day, it's a new day in the United States Senate. It's a new day in America, the majority leader-elect told reporters following the vote. Congratulations to Senator John Thune, the newly elected Senate Majority Leader. President-elect Trump cheered on Truth Social. He moves quickly and will do an outstanding job. Rick Scott of Florida, a late favorite of hard-right members, was eliminated on the first ballot after receiving just 13 votes to 15 for Cornyn and 23 for Thune. So he was ousted relatively quickly, but that was a name that was being thrown around by, numerous conservatives. But both rounds of votes were made by secret ballot among 53 Republican senators and senators-elect, including Vice President-elect and Senator J.D. Vance and Senator Marco Rubio, who was announced hours later as Trump's nominee for Secretary of State. Now, an online pressure campaign from Trump allies, including people like Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk, failed to whip up enough senators to quietly support Scott and oust competitors seen as more establishment-minded. Scott saying, "I want to thank my colleagues and the millions of Americans who supported my run and made their voices heard to demand change. We will never stop fighting to turn our country around, advance President Trump's agenda, and make America great again." Now, Thune said, this Republican team is united, as I had mentioned, saying that they can't wait to implement Trump's agenda. To those who were supporting another candidate, I promise to be a leader who serves the entire Republican Congress, said Thune. Now, Kirk responded to social media that Thune had a short window to show us he will support President Trump, fill his cabinet, confirm his judges, and pass his agenda. If he doesn't, we will work to remove him. That's Charlie Kirk. Thune also promised to work closely with the Trump administration to enforce border security laws and remove violent criminals. So your thoughts as we go this morning? John Thune selected in the Senate for Majority Leader. Again, this is all for vote. And then you have Mike Johnson in the House. We're going to talk about the Trump administration and how it is shaping up when we come back. I know we've covered a lot before that. We've had a little offhanded conversations about it, but we're going to talk about it in depth when we come back. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back. Look at our beautiful view of Market Street. Thank you again to Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. A comment from a viewer. Why is New York State giving $1 million to Puerto Rico? Who does Hochul think she is to give away our tax dollars when New York State needs it for other purposes? Now, I know Cuomo gave $1 million. Just to be honest with you, I did not know that was the case. Clearly, Hochul doesn't care about New York State, but is only interested in her own agenda, whatever that is. This is only one more example of the big government Democrat idea of tax and tax and tax and tax. Yes. Well, I would agree with that last part, and I don't disagree with the other. I had just not heard of it. But yes, Hochul is only interested about Hochul. We saw that with a press conference that did not only no good for New Yorkers, it did plenty of harm by calling out Trump and saying how they were going to rally around in New York to protect us from Trump. Well, all they did was hurt the state. Did you see Scott Jennings? Scott Jennings has been on fire. He's on CNN. He's a Trump supporter. When they were talking about P. Hegseth's pick for defense secretary, and even Carl Bernstein was on the panel. Jennings pointed out, does anyone have confidence in the current leadership of the Pentagon and the way the defense situation has been operating for the last several years? Because that's the excuse. We don't know what he's going to bring, and there's no confidence in him. He's just the Fox News host, that type of thing. So does anybody have confidence in the current leadership at the Pentagon? I mean, from the Afghanistan pullout, which was an extreme debacle for which no one was held accountable. We've had spy balloons flying over the United States. We built a $300 million pier for aid in Gaza as a public relations stunt, which wound up killing an American service member. I'd say that I've had just about enough of the so-called insiders running the Defense Department. And that's somewhat the point we've been making on this program, that they say, he has no experience, whether it's whoever, saying well, this could be trouble. They don't have the Washington experience. Well, good. Look what the Washington experience has given us. When Bernstein tried to push back on Jennings' dismissal of D.C. insiders, the Kentucky native was quick with his own retort. Yes, Carl Bernstein, the much worshipped of Woodward and Bernstein fame by journalists all over, bringing down a sitting Republican president. But anyway, I hear all the criticism of him is that he's not an expected Washington pick. And I'm just saying to you that the American people just voted against the expected Washington pick. He's got 20 years in service, Afghanistan, Iraq, 2 Bronze Stars, Princeton, Harvard. Yeah, he's on TV, but so are the rest of us. Van Jones signaled the alarm, and we're just going to talk about Peter Hegseth real quickly. But Van Jones saying, I think, look, he looks great, but he sounds terrible. And I think if it's not broke, don't fix it. There's the fiction that there's something wrong with America's military. What problem are you trying to solve? We have the most lethal, respected, the most feared military in the history of the world. There's not even a number 2. So the idea that our military, there's something wrong with it, our generals are terrible, this is fiction. So when you start trying to solve non-existent problems with the best fighting force in the world, you actually create problems. Now, I think I would go back to Scott Jennings' point. What about the Afghanistan withdrawal? There's been so many, and that's one reason why they believe Hegseth was chosen, because of that book about the woke policies in the military today, which has caused a real issue with recruiting. So Van Jones ignoring the fact of recruiting issues. But he said, I don't think there's any data or evidence that shows that having women involved in the military has made the military worse. Where's the evidence of this? This is all fiction, and it's all quite frightening. I don't think anybody can defend this choice. This is not somebody, this is a Fox News host who used to be in the military. If that's the standard we're going to be going with, I think it's very alarming. Your thoughts on Van Jones's anger there at the pick for Hegseth? First of all, I think the biggest problem, if Van Jones was honest, it would be that it's a Fox News host. If Peter Hegseth would have been a CNN host, I'm sure there wouldn't have been that kind of criticism. But they look to Fox News as the enemy because Fox News has skyrocketing ratings. And if you look at CNN laying off right around 100 people, we learned yesterday, or that is being reported, that they could lay off hundreds of people because their ratings plummeting after Election Day. But Miranda Devine at the Post says Democrats' attack on the intelligent, articulate, and patriotic Pete Hegseth shows why they lost. This shows exactly why Democrats lost the election in a landslide. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we're going to get into yesterday's picks. And again, more on Matt Gaetz. I know we've talked a little bit about it this morning, but there's a lot to discuss there. And I know I somewhat saved it for the 7 o'clock hour. That was not my intention. We just had so much to catch up on. So stay with us. Last break of this hour, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Visit Boss Security in Horseheads today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street, wrapping up, hard to believe, hour number 1. Well, anyway, we've got a couple comments that came in right before I came back from break, and we will get to those at the top of the next hour. But as I mentioned, Miranda Devine saying that the Democrats' attacks on the intelligent, articulate, and patriotic Pete Hegseth shows why they lost in a landslide election. He's an inspired choice to lead the Pentagon and rid it of the woke poison that has sent recruitment levels down the toilet. Not only that, but he has a tattoo of "We the People" on his arm, a visible sign of his American first commitment to the Constitution, whose first words remind us that America, at its founding, rejected rule by elites. And yet, because Hegseth, most recently, has been a popular Fox News host, the liberal intelligentsia is accusing him of being stupid and unqualified. It's the old bag of tricks that they always use. We saw it there with Van Jones and others. It's that tactic that he's dumb because he's on Fox News. He's a lot better qualified to run the Defense Department than Kamala Harris ever was to be Commander-in-Chief. That's a very solid and good point from Miranda Devine. But they asked for it with Gaetz. And this one surprised me a little bit. It says, after Trump announced Wednesday that Matt Gaetz was his attorney general pick, the left completely lost its mind. But they asked for it. What Gaetz, an articulate and fearless pit bull congressman from Florida, Trump is signaling that it's no more Mr. Nice Guy in his second term when it comes to the corrupted Department of Justice that conducted lawfare against him and his allies, ran cover for the Biden family's corruption, sicked the FBI onto parents at school board meetings and Christians praying outside of abortion clinics, and treated nonviolent January 6 protesters like domestic terrorists. Beltway insider journalist Mark Halperin summed up the reaction. Quote, Donald Trump's selection of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General has hit official Washington like a bomb. And isn't that what the American people voted for in a way? And again, I think like our one viewer said, the one viewer, there's more than one, but the one viewer said, which was, Matt Gaetz on a thin line. And I agree. I mean, it's going to be one of those things that learn, you know. There's a reason why Donald Trump picked him. I think there are some questions there, and we're going to talk about this more in the next hour, and that's why I'm kind of highlighting this at the beginning, or well, at the end of the first hour. But there's something important in that statement. Donald Trump's selection of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General has hit official Washington like a bomb. A rattled Andrew Weissman, the Russiagate plotter and former DOJ prosecutor, blathered incoherently on MSNBC that Gaetz is, quote, not just unqualified, but untethered to the facts and maybe also the law. He is Exhibit A of weaponization, and we are in pure George Orwell 1984 land. How is he Exhibit A of weaponization? I need some more explanation on that before we can just accept you at face value. We're going to talk about Matt Gaetz and, Marco Rubio, which was an exciting pick yesterday, kind of buried in the headlines after the Matt Gaetz surprise, and it did surprise a lot of Republicans. And it wasn't a name, I guess, I'll put it this way, it was a name not many expected. So we're going to talk about that in the next hour. Thank you for joining us for hour number one. Looking forward to hour number two, where we have a lot to cover. We're not just going to spend the whole hour talking about Matt Gaetz. We will talk about Rubio. We'll talk about, we'll talk about all the picks that happened yesterday, that occurred yesterday. Go in depth a little bit on that. Tulsi Gabbard, I know many excited about that. So stay with us. We got hour number two coming up in a moment. Hour number one in the books. We'll be right back. Hour number two, well, frankly speaking, on this November 14th. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We are going to go to some viewer comments. But before that, I wanted to mention, before I forgot, yesterday was a very special day because you might not want to believe this, we are nearing Christmas. And I know it's a little ways away. But when you think of Christmas, of course, you think of bell ringers with the Salvation Army. Well, yesterday was kickoff to the kettle campaign, to the bell ringing season. And we held the kickoff right here in Centerway in Corning. And I wanted to show you just a couple pictures. There we all are, getting ready to open the kettles for 2024. It was a fun event. We had a pretty good attendance. That's basically representatives from the Salvation Army, and I'll tell you who those two gentlemen are in just a moment. That there is Riverside Mayor Rich Wager. It was nice to see him. Then we had, there's the whole group of us. There's everybody from the Salvation Army and our special guests. Then we had Irwintown Supervisor Doug Cole, friend of Frankly Speaking. Appreciate him being there. And again, there we all are kicking off the kettle campaign. And the reason I bring that up is not just to tell you, you better get some, there's a new system. I was going to say, you better get some change, get some dollars, fives, tens ready, because you're going to start to see the bells. But also, the kettles, I should say. But also, there's a new system on some of them where you can, I tried it yesterday, where you put your card up and you can pick $5, $10, $20. You put your card right on there and it'll beep and you made that donation. Very useful at a time when so many people do not bring money out. So there is that as well. But we're glad to kick off the kettle campaign. As has been mentioned on this program before, I am proudly a member of, actually chairman of the Salvation Army of Corning. So we talk about them a lot. And last year, if you remember, we had a telethon for them in the Christmas season. So just mark your calendars, because a little short of a month, on December the 13th, that's a Friday, December the 13th, we are going to have the telethon again. The second annual telethon here on Frankly Speaking, and it's going to go to the Salvation Army. We'll have the kettle out front if you want to stop by and wave. We'll have special guests, great music from the Crystal Chords and others. We're just starting the planning, not starting really, but getting the planning process in full effect right now, but it's going to be a great day here on the air on December the 13th. Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for all our guests who attended the kettle kickoff yesterday. All right, here we go. A couple comments from viewers. First up, next time Hochul comes up, you might mention that somebody as political as her might ponder the fact that 300,000 more New Yorkers voted for Trump in 2024 as voted for her in 2022. That's a great point. Also, I would mention, I don't think she's that political. I think she wants to be. I think she really, really wants to be. But just as I keep saying, not ready for prime time. But she should keep that in mind, just like when they said it's anybody's ball game in 2026, because you never know what's going to happen. I hope we get, now that Zeldin is going to be Environmental Protection Agency Administrator, I hope that we can find someone else with a name recognition and that did such a great job like he did. Though not winning, ultimately making those huge inroads, and just like Trump did, and winning helped secure the majority in the House. Okay, comment from a different viewer. It's so great that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi have been fired. Yes, isn't it? They should be able to work on Broadway with their acting skills. Chuck is great with fake tears. He sure is. And Nancy is great with tantrums. I think we could dedicate a whole show. And, you know, it's being said, but not as much as I think it should be. I think there should be books written about it. Her ego and confidence after she ousted, had that coup against Biden, and then Biden, at the end of the day, proven right, should have been him. Now, we don't know if he would have won. We don't. I mean, I have my doubts, but we don't know, correct? So all he had to do, and I hope, more than anything, he called Nancy Pelosi late election night or early the next day and said, I told you so. I'm the only one that could do it, and you said I couldn't. The only one with a proven record that could beat Trump, and you had to have Kamala Harris. So her confidence that time, you remember when she first did it, saying, I did what I had to do. And now walking that back a little bit and having the audacity, it goes to show you how dirty politics is. Like Trump said with Biden yesterday, politics isn't always a wonderful thing, but today it is, that kind of thing. To show you how nasty, the same people that propped up Biden, then embarrassed him by taking him out after the debate, then blame him for not getting out early enough. After they propped him up, I mean, I don't know. If that doesn't show you who Democrats are and their lust for power, I don't know what does. Next up, from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. A couple of waves, actually. Personally, there is something about Tulsi, that doesn't sit well with me. Maybe her support of Bernie Sanders in the past is stuck in my head. That's a fair point. I will say I've thought, and it's only anecdotal. You can fall in a trap if you say, everybody I know thinks this, everybody I know thinks that, because everybody you know doesn't change what happened in the election. But I've heard from numerous people that said it was that coalition, if you will, of Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. that made them kind of hold their nose and vote for Trump, because they saw how bad the country was going and what they felt the country would be doing if Harris were elected. And they said, well, we know Trump has a proven record. We know what he's capable of. I'm not the biggest fan of maybe his tweets or whatever it is. But I also like the fact that it's not about Republican and Democrat necessarily at this point. I mean, you're talking about a Kennedy stumping for a Republican. It's not about Democrat or Republican at this point. It's about literally making America great again. So but I understand your concern. I'm not diminishing your concern at all, because we saw what happened in 2016 when Trump didn't pick the best people, put the best people around him. And of course, there's whistleblowers and there was leaks and there was books, and most of it, I mean, hearsay and not true, we know. And many of those lies, though, were repeated over and over again, right up until Election Day. So I understand your concern. I look at this list, probably like many of you, thinking who could be the trouble in it. Who could cause an issue and, give that anonymous interview to CNN over and over again. So I understand your concern. Tulsi Gabbard being chosen for Director of National Intelligence. Okay. So yesterday, what was supposed to be the big news was Senator Marco Rubio selected to be the United States Secretary of State. And of course, it was big news. They had a contentious primary back in 2016, but bygones are bygones. And Donald J. Trump picked who he felt would be the best United States Secretary of State. And as he said in his statement, that is Donald J. Trump, that he is a highly respected leader and a very powerful voice for freedom. He will be a strong advocate for our nation, a true friend to our allies, and a fearless warrior who will never back down to our adversaries. I look forward to working with Marco, to make America and the world safe and great again. I know that they had some troubles in the past, but I think this is a good move. Marco Rubio has been doing a great job, outspoken in his support of Trump, going on the Sunday shows, giving interviews, very outspoken in his support of Donald Trump. Now, who's going to replace Senator Marco Rubio in Florida? Do you know who the favorite is right now? The name that's being thrown around as the top choice to replace Marco Rubio as Florida Senator? Laura Trump. Those close to the 42-year-old mother of two say she is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' definitive top choice to replace Rubio in the D.C. trenches. That's a fact, one source near Trump and her political career told the Post. And even Tesla's CEO and Trump administration advisor Elon Musk is talking to her about the career move. But she needs to make a decision. That's hard when Elon and everyone else is encouraging you to do it. Laura, who's married to Trump's second son and Trump Organization boss Eric, is Republican National Committee co-chair, and she's been receiving serious internal GOP recognition after her father-in-law's stunning Election Day victory. Yes, some wondered how she would do as Republican National Committee co-chair. Clearly did a wonderful job. She would join Senator Rick Scott on Capitol Hill in a new GOP majority that's reportedly laser-focused on tax cuts and immigration reform. So Laura Trump may be replacing, at least at the top of the list, according to sources close to Ron DeSantis, top of the list to replace Marco Rubio. Very interesting. Another Trump in there. See all those people that said save your yard signs? That's a little different. It is in Florida, but if you vacation in Florida, there you go. Now, with Tulsi Gabbard serving as Director of National Intelligence, and I would love your opinion on each of these because we're going to talk about Matt Gaetz in just a moment. For over 2 decades, Tulsi has fought for our country, according to Donald J. Trump, and the freedoms of all Americans. As a former candidate for the Democrat presidential nominee, she has broad support in both parties. She is now a proud Republican. I know Tulsi will bring the fearless spirit that has defined her illustrious career to our intelligence community, championing our constitutional rights and securing peace through strength. Tulsi will make us all proud. There was such an anger and hatred of Tulsi Gabbard. If you recall, she did a really good job in running for president in 2016. 2019. What am I thinking? 2019 when she went after Kamala Harris in the debate. Well, they turned on her relatively quickly, meaning the Democrats, and the media got nasty. And she finally said, I'm an independent person. I'm going to do what I want to do, and started supporting Republican causes and ultimately supporting Donald Trump. The problem with that is Democrats, unlike Republicans, when a Republican turns their back on their own party and ridicules their own party, they get shows on CNN. They get praised. Look at Liz Cheney. They get praised to high heaven by the media on the left. That's when a Republican turns on Republicans. When a Democrat turns on Democrats, that's when the long knives come out. So not only was she attacked when she initially started kind of wavering from the Democrat belief, but also when she went full in on Trump. And then now that she's in there, she's not qualified. How dare he pick her? She's the worst. So it doesn't work the same way if you're a Democrat. So I thought that was an interesting pick. You had to figure, as much as she had put into the campaign and supported him, you had to think that he would put her in some type of position there. What it was, we didn't know, but now nominated for Director of National Intelligence. Very interesting, but that is a woman that is hated by the left because of her switching of position. Now, we get to Matt Gaetz, and I know we've been talking about him a little bit this morning, but let me read the president's statement. Then we'll take a break and dive into what is being said in the media, what is being said by politicians, etc. This is the official statement from President Donald J. Trump from the Trump Vance transition email. It is my great honor to announce that Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida is hereby nominated to be the Attorney General of the United States. Matt is a deeply gifted and tenacious attorney, trained at the William & Mary College of Law, who has distinguished himself in Congress through his focus on achieving desperately needed reform at the Department of Justice. Few issues in America are more important than ending the partisan weaponization of our justice system. Matt will end weaponized government, protect our borders, dismantle criminal organizations, and restore America's badly shattered faith and confidence in the Justice Department. On the House Judiciary Committee, which performs oversight of DOJ, Matt played a key role in defeating the Russia hoax and exposing alarming and systemic government corruption and weaponization. He's a champion for the Constitution and the rule of law. Matt will root out the systemic corruption at DOJ and return the department to its true mission of fighting crime and uphold our democracy and Constitution. We must have honesty, integrity, and transparency at DOJ. Under Matt's leadership, all Americans will be proud of the Department of Justice. Once again, so your thoughts when we come back. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Boss Security Roof Cam. Visit Boss Security in Horseheads today for all your business and home security needs. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Receiving so many comments. Sorry, I was back a little bit late from break. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. I love the bell ringers. Can't walk by without dropping in cash. Can you tell me why I don't know about the specific places. I don't want to call anybody out because I don't know that specifically. Where some big box stores won't let people raise money for those in need. Yeah, it doesn't cost them anything. They have volunteers outside their doors and freezing while volunteering their time. I don't know the answer for that. Sorry. I will try to do some more research. I can ask at the next board meeting. Here's a very interesting point from a viewer. Because Matt Gaetz barely escaped being prosecuted, he'll be under the microscope of both parties. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If you're not familiar with Matt Gaetz and why it is such a shock, he was facing, really a sex trafficking probe. He abruptly resigned because I guess, at least if you trust the New York Times, they were going to release their findings on Friday. Of what they found in that probe, but once you resign and you're no longer a congressperson, they can't. There's no investigation. There's nothing to investigate. You're now a private citizen. Is the idea. House Speaker Mike Johnson announced that Gaetz resigned from Congress effective immediately, soon after Trump's shock announcement, which came reportedly before a Friday vote on whether to release a House Ethics Committee report related to allegations of sexual misconduct and drug use involving the now former congressman. So to that viewer's point, it does raise some red flags, and there will be a magnifying glass on Mr. Gaetz. Gaetz' resignation will end the investigation that was initiated back in April of 2021, over allegations that the congressman engaged in sexual misconduct and illicit drug use, accepted improper gifts, dispensed special privileges and favors to individuals with whom he had a personal relationship, and sought to obstruct government investigations of his conduct. The ethics panel was reportedly set to vote Friday on whether to release its, quote, highly damaging report on Gaetz, according to Punchbowl News. But with him resigning, the panel no longer has jurisdiction to pursue the investigation. Now, this whole time, Gaetz has vehemently denied any wrongdoing. When he helped engineer the ouster of former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, McCarthy said it was because he refused to shut down the investigation. So that is a quick look at why. Well, there's numerous reasons to be shocked by the Matt Gaetz selection. That is just one of the avenues. But there's a lot of people talking about Matt Gaetz this morning, that's for sure. And thank you for all the comments that we've received so far. According to the New York Post editorial board, and I mentioned this earlier in the program, the headline, and I like it, and I think it's somewhat appropriate. Trump transition is offering the dawn of a new reform era. Plus, Matt Gaetz. Senate Republicans on Wednesday chose calm, soft-spoken John Thune as the next majority leader, even as the conservative House faction gave up on running an opponent to contest Mike Johnson's continued speakership. The path is smoothing out wonderfully for President-elect Donald Trump to truly usher in the promised, quote, golden age. Then, Trump announced Matt Gaetz as his pick for Attorney General. We understand why the once and future prez wants a complete loyalist in that job. The Justice Department played a key role in hamstringing Trump 4 years ago with its horrific bungling of the utterly made-up Russiagate nonsense. But Gaetz has made a lot of personal enemies in the few years in Congress. More knives will be out for him than were for Senator John Tower, the last cabinet nominee rejected by the Senate back in 1989. So going back to that viewer's point, the microscope, the magnifying glass will be on Mr. Gaetz. Any Senate confirmation hearing will be a tawdry spectacle featuring the sex trafficking and drug claims that have swirled around Gaetz. Not a good look. Trump likes to keep things interesting, and this move will definitely do that. His other picks have been solid. Marco Rubio for state completes an absolutely top-notch, outside-the-box national security team that puts China, Russia, Iran, and other dark powers on notice that the days of appeasement are over. This includes the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. The intelligence community has become a rancid hotbed of political game playing. With Gabbard, Trump sends the strongest possible signal that it must and will end. She, along with other key nominees, also makes good on Trump's iron vow to end all the covert fighting disinformation, government censorship operations. Similar with the Army veteran Pete Hegseth for defense means real change on the way in the Pentagon. And we can go on, but a golden age may be tough to pull off. But this is definitely the dawn of a promising new era in Washington. As I mentioned, a CNN commentator, and we're going to take a break here in just a moment, but CNN commentator Scott Jennings, who has been on fire this whole election season, and he may have been before, this is when he's been more on our radar. Scott Jennings asked the question, are you not entertained? What's that from Gladiator, right? Are you not entertained? I mean, he is the most entertaining. That doesn't make sense. I mean, his is the most entertaining transition I've ever seen. I was as surprised as Paula because it was not a name we have seen. We have seen some reporting, a lot of different names, frankly, a lot of sort of well-heeled Washington legal types that were on the list. This is for, again, Matt Gaetz's position. So I'm surprised as anyone. Yes, for Attorney General. He continued, but what I take away from this is that this is a president-elect who is feeling his power. This is someone who is appointing people to things, whether it is Gaetz or anyone else we have seen today, who is feeling his influence. Doesn't feel like he's in a mood to negotiate with people in Washington, D.C. He's here to do what he wants to do, and he's going to expect that Republicans fall in line. Now, all these people have to go through confirmations, whether it's Gaetz, Hegseth, or anyone else. They have to go through confirmation and have to go through these committee hearings and prove themselves like anyone else. But it is apparent to me that Trump is in a decisive mood and is not interested in picking things he would consider to be watered down. Interesting point, but I like that. Are you not entertained? It definitely created a media meltdown and kind of establishment Washington meltdown on both sides, Democrat and Republican. We'll talk about it more when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam is brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Thank you for joining us here on Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson's studio. We've got a couple interviews coming up in the near future. This week we've been focused on the news, but we will return next week with numerous interviews for our Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. It's just been a busy 2 weeks of news, and it's been tough to squeeze people in. So I appreciate people being understanding. We'll be back to our interview schedule very soon. All right, let's go back to viewer comments. Comment number 1, people that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. They want to bring up Matt Gaetz, release Epstein's hard drives, photos, videos, and other recordings. Wait, they can't do that? It would expose a multitude of elites that need to be held accountable. Then show and release Diddy evidence with even more of the same evidence. Can't wait for Trump to get some of it, if not all of it, released. Thank you very much. And in a similar fashion, from a different viewer, just a thought regarding the biased media's reporting of other people's lives. I wonder if those who are doing the reporting are squeaky clean. Maybe the holier than thou should be looking in the mirror instead of hypocritically scrutinizing others. Very good point. And you'll see, how many times is there a scandal in the media? We're bringing somebody down. Yeah, so I think you all have a good point there. From Pennsylvania, Senator John Fetterman. Now, he's obviously he's a Democrat, and there's positions that many don't agree with him on, but he's been very outspoken on Israel. There's a couple things he really sort of predicted Trump's win in Pennsylvania, saying, you got to understand, Trump is really resonating with people here in Pennsylvania, really connecting with them. Well, they asked him about the choice of Representative Matt Gaetz to serve as his next attorney general. He said it's just kind of like a God tier kind of trolling. God tier, meaning like the highest tier you can get, kind of trolling just to trigger a meltdown. But really, the Democrats' opinions on Gaetz, that's not really what's interesting. The good ones are going to come to my colleagues on the other side on the GOP and how they can justify voting for that, we'll say, jerk. He did not use that term, though. Yeah, it is sort of like a trolling scenario where, the picks have been going good, and yeah, he got a little bit of a wave when he picked Pete Hegseth. Some people saying, "Wait a minute, what?" In the media, and now he's in typical Trump fashion. How do you like this one? And throw it out there as the one article posted that we mentioned earlier, saying that it threw a bomb in the official or it's like a bomb went off in official Washington. Well, that's the point, right? The official Washington is what Trump is fighting against. The quote-unquote swamp. Now, A.G. Gankarski, we mentioned his opinion pieces. And as I've said, I think I've been very outspoken about this. I'm learning, like many of you, about Matt Gaetz. We knew about him as a congressman. We remember the speakers' fights. We knew that Ken McCarthy. Ken McCarthy was not necessarily a fan, so we learned a lot about the investigation. Well, A.G. Gankarski said, will the last Florida Republican who leaves Congress for the Trump administration please turn out the lights? That's one takeaway from Donald Trump's slam dunk selection of Panhandle Representative Matt Gaetz for his second term Attorney General. As opposed to his first term AGs, Jeff Sessions and Bill Barr, there's no doubt where the always quotable congressman falls with his legal and political philosophy. He is, from beginning to end, a pit bull defender of Donald Trump in good times, in bad times, and everything in between. I think we actually had a viewer use that exact term, pit bull, right? At a low point for Trump reputationally, for example, as Republicans lined up to begin what some actually thought would be a post-Trump era, Gaetz in 2022 pushed for the former president to be House Speaker. In the just concluded campaign, Gaetz promised at a July rally he would be the president's strongest defender in Congress. That's one promise that bombastic legal eagle won't be able to keep, as he'll be defending the president and the reforms he seeks to make on the national stage. And unlike the previous occupants of the position under Trump, he will crawl over broken glass if necessary to serve out the full 4 years. Gaetz' ascension means that the age of lawfare against the president is over for good. There's no ambivalence at all for this man. The Florida Republican Party hails as a conservative warrior who will end the weaponization of our government, protect our borders, and restore confidence in our Justice Department. Gaetz has been subject to the weaponization himself, of course, with the Justice Department smearing his name a few years back, dogging him with unfounded allegations of scandals related to improper sexual conduct. The drip, drip, drip of leaks was intended to ruin him, trying him in the media and denying him due process and the ability to answer his accusers, who ended up lacking credibility. Now, in an illustration of how full circle politics is, he's the president-elect's choice for the chief legal officer in the land. Gaetz was without vocal allies during his time in the wilderness, including a man he got elected Florida governor in 2018, Ron DeSantis. Back then, Gaetz was the hype man for DeSantis' campaign as the future governor dispatched a primary challenger, then fought an uphill battle against Democrat Andrew Gillum. Gaetz traveled around the state with a then congressman to various events, accompanied him to at least one debate, and coached him up for debates as well. Among the points of advice for DeSantis, be likable and not condescending. Good counsel indeed. His reward was a spot on DeSantis' transition team. Then, just like Trump Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, called the most powerful woman in the world by the president, he was kicked to the curb unceremoniously. But whereas DeSantis actively tried to wreck Wiles, he shivved Gaetz repeatedly. Asked about Gaetz' legal issues, yada, yada, yada. But he's the latest sign of the president-elect's big tent approach to Trump 2.0. And he will be a transformational force in an office so often staffed by people who are at best forgettable and at worst anti in the normal American's desires of what the job should entail. John, now let's take a look at the other side. Do I have time? I do. John Bolton, as Dennis Miller used to call him, the nuclear walrus. John Bolton, no fan of Donald Trump, though work for Trump. John Bolton is, in full disclosure, I interviewed him back when I was on radio, but he's the kind of person that wants to be viewed as very important, very intelligent, really your go-to for international affairs. He wants to be viewed as, well, he's one of the ones when they're talking about putting someone in Trump's cabinet. And Don Jr. said something to the extent of, we don't want anybody in that cabinet who thinks they know better and can run things better than Donald Trump. We don't want somebody in there that thinks that they're smarter and can do a better job, because that's not what their job is. John Bolton is definitely one of those people. He walks into a room and he believes he's the smartest person in that room. He also believes that he could run the country better than Donald Trump. So that didn't work well when he was in the administration. And since then, he's, like typical, very Liz Cheney-esque, because he's been very outspoken in his dislike of Donald Trump. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he even came out, and it means so little that it doesn't stick in my mind, but he came out and endorsed Harris. He's one of those people that, look at this, everybody's going to care about what I have to say and what I do. Very egotistical, right? Narcissistic. So much so that I don't know who he thinks he is, but he is demanding that the FBI probes into Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard before confirmation hearing, because they're, quote, a serious threat to national security. Again, I'd ask the question, who does John Bolton think he is? But this is John Bolton's history. This is his career. He's always thought he was the smartest person in the room and should be listened to the most. So he thinks when he endorses Harris, that's going to change things. Imagine coming out the piggybacking of endorsing Harris and then thinking, well, people still care what I say, so now I'm going to talk about who should be probed before the confirmation hearings. He said, I don't think either she or Matt Gaetz ought to have a confirmation hearing until they have both had full field FBI investigations. Given the Russian propaganda that has espoused over the past period of time, I think she's a serious threat to our national security. With his announcement of Tulsi Gabbard to be the director of national intelligence, he's sending a signal that we have lost our minds when it comes to collecting intelligence. Up until a few years ago, I would have said that was the worst cabinet appointment in recent American history. Of course, since Matt Gaetz's nomination, he clearly has taken the lead on that score. I would say, anyway, I don't know, the worst cabinet. Well, let's talk about Bolton's time. Bolton served in the Trump administration for 17 months before he was fired by Trump over foreign policy disagreements. Another person, and John Bolton's a prime example of it. He may be the poster child for it, thinking he knows better than the person that was elected by the people of the United States of America. The American voter elected Donald Trump. John Bolton thinks he's smarter than Donald Trump, and they're therefore smarter than the American people. All right, we're going to talk more about this when we come back. Keep those waves, keep those comments coming in. I see quite a few there. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, which break am I on? Big Fox, stay with us. We'll be, I don't remember. There we go. Right back. Thank you again to Boss Security, excuse me. I have a frog in my throat. Thank you again to Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Our beautiful view of historic Market Street, where we happen to be broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. Let's go to some viewer comments. How come no one talks about the 20 million voters that we are short? It should be on everyone's mind, the 20 million difference from 2020 to 2016. I think I've heard some people talk about it. I don't have an answer for that. Next up, not sure if Matt Gaetz is an alligator in the swamp or a duck for the ones in the swamp to feed on. That's a really great way of putting that. I don't know the answer yet either. I don't. I think many people's ideas of Matt Gaetz have been formed by a few things. One, the media's interpretation of him, which that I throw by the wayside. I think my thought process goes back to the whole Kevin McCarthy and the House, the Speaker of the House race and all that. And again, that's why I'm, like many viewers, I think today, saying let's wait. Again, I'm going to read this line because I think it's perfect. Not sure if Matt Gaetz is an alligator in the swamp or a duck for the ones in the swamp to feed on. It's a great question. But Trump has reason for it. And I know there are people not in this crowd, but I know there's a lot of people that not necessarily like J.D. Vance. That they were skeptical of J.D. Vance. Spectacle might work too, just because they weren't as familiar with him. And that could be this situation because, look, J.D. Vance turned out to be great. Turned out to do a good job, a great job running as VP, actually doing something most VPs don't, which is actually make waves and make a difference. So, just keep that in mind. as we watch and learn along with the rest of the country. Another comment from a viewer. Last night on Gutfeld, Tyrese said he thought about being press secretary till he found out what the salary was. And he said, why do that when we can just sit here? That's probably a good point. I don't know what the secretary is, but I know yesterday we had someone say they wanted Tyrese to be press secretary. That would make those get-togethers a little more interesting, wouldn't it? Could you imagine, too, when the media go after him? I mean, he was no nonsense. So that it's funny to think about. Okay, I like this one. I like all the comments. I shouldn't have worded it like that. But this one did make me laugh because we were talking about John Bolton. In all fairness to John Bolton, if he's spending time with the Democrats, he probably is the smartest person in the room. John Bolton, I don't know. Again, in full disclosure, I talked to him. He was a personable guy, nice guy. But there's a reason why he was so willing to do an interview at that time, because he likes that attention. As one viewer here says, a different viewer, morning, Frank. Well, good morning. You're 100% correct about John Bolton being narcissistic to the core. All these Democrats are narcissistic to the core. Yeah, many are also ideological zealots that cannot be negotiated with, and together that spells trouble. That's a very good point. Because going back to, the narcissist idea, that's why they haven't learned already. We're a week in, little over a week, and back to, not any soul searching on why Kamala lost, but on the attacks, and especially on Matt Gaetz and others. Okay. Democrat Senator Chris Murphy responding to Gaetz for Attorney General. I had mentioned this quickly before, but I want to mention it again just to show you they haven't learned. They don't understand why Trump won. One article saying it's selections like Gaetz and Hegsteth is why people voted for Trump. Murphy said, I was walking off the Senate floor just moments ago when the news was announced. You could literally hear the jaws dropping to the floor of Republican senators who are now going to be in a position to stand up to Donald Trump in a way that they have been unwilling to. On the Republican, I always like when Democrats speak on Republicans' reactions. You ever notice that? I know a ton of Republicans that say they don't like Donald Trump. Secretly, behind closed doors, they'll say they don't think he's fit. You always hear that. Then you go, wait a minute, what happened on election night? Anyway, Matt Gaetz is dangerously unqualified. That's not the worst of it. Gaetz has been Trump's chief defender when it comes to Trump's assault on democracy. His attempt to overthrow the government on January 6th, and he has openly called for the abolition of law enforcement agencies if they don't get in line with conservative political priorities. Wait a minute, hold on. It's coming from the party that pushed to fund the police, and he wants to be critical of someone that is critical of law enforcement agencies if they, and I know what he said, if they don't get in line with conservative policies, but that's not what is being done there. That's just interesting. This is going to be a red alert moment for American democracy. Matt Gaetz is being nominated for one reason and one reason only. He will implement Donald Trump's transition of the Department of Justice from an agency that stands up for all of us to an agency that is simply an arm of the White House designed to persecute and prosecute Trump's political enemies. Again, isn't that what the Department of Justice was now, except for it was to persecute and prosecute Trump or Mr. Murphy, Senator Murphy's political enemies, Biden's political enemies, Harris's political enemies? The projection on these people is remarkable, isn't it? But I'll continue with what he had to say. This is a stunning announcement in some ways, but not surprising in others. Trump told us during the campaign that he was going to use the White House to go after people who politically opposed him. It seems this pick for the head of the Department of Justice is very much in line with the promises he made during the campaign. That they just haven't learned. They have not learned. But we have to take another short break. This show is moving fast, and we're having a great time. I hope you're having a great time as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. We are back with Frankly Speaking. That's your Boss Security Roof Cam. Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio. Some comments from viewers as we, oh wow, so many, comments. First off, hi Frank. Now that Republicans have a House majority of 218, I think the Democrats have 217. Given the slim majority, do you think the House will be able to get any meaningful work done? Well, all the races aren't in this. You just had to hit that magic 218 number to get the majority. I don't think the Democrats are at 217. I tried to look it up real quick, but now all the headlines are the fact that Republicans took it. But I think they'll be able to accomplish things because there was such, when you talk about the popular vote, you talk about the electoral vote for the White House, and then you talk about the House and the Senate. That's the trifecta. That's the big win, and there's no denying that. So I think there'll be some Republicans that maybe normally wouldn't get on board, getting on board because they realize where the American people are at, and they, at the end of the day, want to keep their jobs. But that number doesn't stick. That number doesn't stick with me on the Democrat side, and I don't think that's right. Right now, well, there's a Senate. I can't do this live on there. Sorry. According to this number here from the Associated Press, just found it finally. The GOP is at 218 seats, and the Democrats are at 208 seats. So there you are. That's what we're talking about there. But yes, it's still going to be slim. I'm not disagreeing with you on that at all. It's still going to be a tough fight. Okay, other comments. Frank, Gaetz probably won't get confirmed. I think that was what a lot of people's mindset is, because that's even tough for some Republicans, especially after the House, the Speaker of the House. That's going to be tough for some to swallow. Anyway, the main reason is that he would be able to release information that could harm politicians on both sides of the aisle. Okay, like how did Epstein actually die and who was in the list? How deep was the Justice Department into the lawfare cases against Trump? What deal was made with Hillary to keep her from being prosecuted? What deals were made to keep the Biden crime family away from being prosecuted? If Gaetz did get confirmed, he better have his head on a swivel looking for powerful entities and people that could want to silence him. I think really and so many other people have said this, that's why Gaetz was chosen, because it was to shock, as they said in the headline, official Washington. It set some ripples through that are really making people concerned. So thank you for your point there, Ken. Next up, Frank, a good question to ask would be, who would the Democrats have liked for Trump to have picked for Attorney General? That's a great question. Maybe Kamala Harris. In reality, there would have been no one he picked. Matt Gaetz, so I think we all have to admit, was a little more shocking. Maybe because, number one, he just wasn't on anybody's list. He was not on anybody's, as they always say, bingo card. So I think that's the real shock value. But there was no one that Donald Trump could have picked that they would have been happy with. So to your point, you're exactly right. So we've got to take that as well. It's not as if we're trying to win over a favor from the people in the media and in Washington. That's not why he was elected. But like I said, Andrew Wiseman, legal analyst, said we're now in pure George Orwell 1984 land. The rhetoric continues, folks. Now, GOP Representative Max Miller slammed Matt Gaetz after the announcement. Miller, who served as White House aide under Trump and was endorsed by the 45th president during his primary race against Anthony Gonzalez, described Gaetz as, quote, a guy who is literally worse than the gum on the bottom of my shoe. Miller indicated that he doesn't believe Gaetz, who resigned from Congress Wednesday, will be confirmed by the GOP-led Senate for the cabinet role, and that the Florida Republican doesn't particularly care. Quote, I don't think Matt cares if he gets confirmed or not. Everybody's talking about him, and that's what he likes the most. Miller added that Gaetz ran around here last term like a 6-year-old with a loaded revolver and a happy trigger finger. He wrecked this country for 2 years. Wow. Stephen Collinson from CNN, before we go to our last break. And then we've got a lot of things to run through in our last little segment. We're going to get away from Gaetz. We've got a lot to run through. Stephen Collinson says Donald Trump's increasingly provocative cabinet picks have left some Republican senators angst and Washington in shock. But they really shouldn't, because the outrage is the point. The president-elect reached a new level on Wednesday, announcing Gaetz, one of the most zealous agents of disruption, who, like him, was once investigated by the Justice Department, as his pick for Attorney General. Tulsi Gabbard, the one-time Democrat presidential candidate who now shares Trump's belief that the intelligence community has been weaponized against him, will be America's new top spy, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. The latest selection for Trump's MAGA Dream Team, calling him, caused such a stir that they almost overshadowed the pick of Fox News anchor Pete Hegseth to serve as Defense Secretary on Tuesday night. Yeah, that was originally the outrage about Pete Hegseth. And then they realized, there's other, and I don't understand, you would think, wasn't that supposed to be a big talking point about working with people across the aisle and like that? So why picking Tulsi Gabbard? Why is that such a bad thing? Doesn't that show that he can bring Democrats into the coalition? She ran for president as a Democrat back in 2016. So why Why is that seen as such a bad thing? Matt Gaetz, I understand the media doesn't like Matt Gaetz, and that they've made that crystal clear through the years. But Stephen Collinson, no Trump fan, saying they are perfectly in tune with Trump's campaign trail promises and political project. The dismay engulfing establishment elites contrasted with the euphoria rocketing through conservative networks and social media among Trump fans. The president-elect draws political strength from his position as an outsider scourge of the establishment, and if his picks are confirmed by the Senate, they will be tasked with his mission of cleaning up the government and driving out those Trump sees as enemies. This coming from the party that literally weaponized the Justice Department to go after their enemies, Donald Trump and MAGA supporters. We got to take a short break, though. Wrap up this hour. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson Studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you for joining us. Comment from a viewer. How are we over a week past the election and there's still 9 congressional seats not assigned? That doesn't raise red flags to everyone. I think with some of them, and I don't have specifically, but like the one that finally was called yesterday to give the Republicans a majority, it was so razor thin that I'm sure it triggered recounts and those type of things. But I know there are people that are concerned, don't get me wrong, but the Republicans do have the majority, so it's just a matter if they get more seats or not. But okay, here's a question, though, if you want to talk about math. Question by Andrew Arthur from The Post. Question for Trump to solve. Just how many million migrants did Joe let in? Is it 8 million? 12? Is it 15? The administration refuses to say. That is going to be an interesting thing that Trump needs to get to the bottom of. Melania Trump. We're going through a lot of quick things. Got people waving out there. Got a lot of quick things. Melania Trump will be part-time first lady, full-time mother to Barron during second term, and plans to split time between her homes. Barron's in college saying, all right, why don't you just stick with the full-time first lady? I mean, have a little breathing room, Mom. Joe Rogan claimed that Kamala Harris wanted to avoid marijuana legalization talk as aides feared progressive backlash. Because remember, she prosecuted a ton of people for minor marijuana. Well, now it's all legal everywhere. It almost seems old-timey, but for marijuana possession. And she was even laughed later about how when someone asked her, did you ever smoke? And she laughed, again, proving that she could never really answer a question. But he said, I think they had requirements on things that she didn't want to talk about. She didn't want to talk about marijuana legalization, which I thought was hilarious. That's what Rogan said. Anyway, enough on that. Here we go. Here's a comment from Ken. I think you hit on why Gaetz was nominated. Put up a very toxic candidate that won't be confirmed, and the next slightly toxic candidate won't look quite as bad. And the people that didn't want Gaetz look like they accomplished something. Yeah, then you still get something you want. At the end of the day, Trump, you know how Trump works with these type of things. Did you hear there's a new group out, Blue Anon? It's a conspiracy group from the left saying that Trump didn't actually win. Trump cheated. First, Trump said he doesn't need votes. Then he says he doesn't need to campaign anymore. Next, he tells us we won't need to worry about voting again in 4 years. But today, it seems like he knew he was going to win prior to Election Day. I smell garbage with icky MAGA. So they call it like, anyway. So now there's a group, and of course it won't be covered about the stealing the election won't be covered as when the right had questions. Remember Alan Lichtman, what do they call him, Nostradamus, picking elections, never wrong, and he called Harris. He said Harris is going to win. Oh, it's easy. She fits all the mold, and I've always been right, except for 1 or 2 times, but I've always been right. And he kind of had a breakdown on election night. He said, as I said, things could go wrong. There could be unprecedented events that change the pattern of 160 years of history. That's what happened here. Number 1, disinformation. Oh, yeah, that's the first time there's been disinformation, right? In political contests. There has always been disinformation, but the disinformation has exploded to an unprecedented degree. You talk about a grievance election, but a lot of that grievance was driven by disinformation, blah, blah, blah. So it's all conspiracy theories, and he pushes conspiracy theories, and yep, they'll call him a Nostradamus again in 4 years. I hate to end on this topic. Final question. Far left Slate asked a question about 20 2028, excuse me, presidential election. Why not AOC? We're out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to everybody who joined us. We'll be back tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m. Don't miss it. I look forward to it already. Have a great day, everyone.